and welcome to Devlog number 39. It's been quite a while since the last one, but we certainly have not been idle. As I said I would do, immediately after posting the last devlog, I sat down for about 2 straight weeks of non-stop solo playtesting and bug fixing. I don't even know how many times I played through the first 7 rooms of the campaign. And the really good news is that I actually had a lot of honest-to-God fun doing that playtesting. Even though there were tons of bugs, even though I had to replay each room a couple times to even get it to play through the first time, even though I knew everything that was going to happen and where every enemy ship was going to pop up, I still had a ton of fun, and honestly, it kind of reminded me why I had gotten into game development in the first place, which was a reminder I kind of sorely needed at this point. And the campaign has only improved since that initial couple of playthroughs that I did. Most of the remainder of the campaign-specific skirmish mechanics have now been implemented, and there are even a couple surprise mechanics that I had not originally planned to implement that I had to in order to resolve a couple of unexpected issues that we're going to talk about in this devlog. The entirety of Act 1 has been whiteboxed, and now we're moving on to grayboxing the maps. And Act 1 weighs in at basically 18 missions at this point from start to finish. It includes things like the empty starting room that introduces the player and a couple story point rooms, but basically each of the rooms is designed as kind of a tactical puzzle. They vary a lot, but in each room you'll either be completing an objective, encountering a new ship type, encountering a new enemy tactic, getting a story beat, fighting a boss, or some combination of all of those things. It's really exciting to be at this point, and I'm going to talk about a lot of the new stuff that's been done in the last couple months, and at the very end we're going to talk about the release schedule, because I know how YouTube works, so make sure you stick around to the end. First up, campaign co-op. Yes, the campaign is playable in co-op with your friends, and it is fully implemented after I spent the entire month of November working on it. I really wanted to offer this because I love playing Neb as a multiplayer game. I think it really thrives when you throw other humans into the mix, and I was nervous about whether or not we'd be able to make it work, but I am very proud to say that it is working. There are a couple bugs here and there to fix, but nothing that can't be hammered out before release. I've played a little bit of co-op myself beyond just the testing features aspects. I've also been watching the testers play their co-op games, and they look like they're having a blast. In fact, a lot of the B-roll that you're going to see in this video that's not me explicitly demonstrating new features is actually from a tester co-op game that I got footage from. I'm going to try to preemptively answer a couple of the questions I expect to get about co-op. So for one, it'll be locally hosted only, so you'll host from your client the way that you can host a skirmish lobby right now. It didn't really make sense to do dedicated server support for a campaign when there's not really anything that's going to happen when people aren't logged into play, so that's why I decided to go down that route. You'll be able to host co-op for any campaign, not just the one that comes with the game. So if you make your own campaign in the campaign editor, you don't even actually need to publish it to the workshop. You only need to do that if you want other people to be able to play it on their own. But if you host a lobby with a custom campaign that you built, anyone who joins that lobby will have it downloaded to their computer along with the save state, and they can play it without having to subscribe to it. Mods will be usable with custom campaigns, although that is not actually tested yet. The framework is only there. And then another question that I've actually seen asked a few times, so this is not a preemptive answer, is who controls what in a co-op campaign? And so I've added this new button in the corner for co-op campaigns specifically, which opens up the ship TACON or tactical control menu. It's a little silly that there's 2 of me here because I'm connected to myself on my own computer with 2 clients, but basically you've got a list of all the players who are in the game at the top and a list of all of the ships in the player's fleet on the left, and then you have this matrix in the middle that allows you to select who controls each ship and apply that. And so if I give this ship to my other self, I notice that I can't actually change its control now because you can only give away control, you can't take control, which makes it so that you can't just have one of your ships taken from you at an inopportune time or when you don't want it to be. So this is more of like a ship gifting kind of system. And then on my other client, I can give the ship back, so it's not like once you're the host and you give away a ship, it's stuck with that player forever. The first of the surprise mechanics that I've implemented is in Skirmish Unrep. Replenishing your ships using the Mercator was always planned as part of the campaign. It's kind of a core aspect of your persistent fleet as you go from place to place in this behind enemy lines situation. But the original design for that was to kind of only take place as you moved between the rooms, and I'll show the UI for that in a little bit. But when I implemented the basic fuel mechanic, which is very simple. You just, burn a unit of fuel from each ship as you move from room to room, just to keep it simple. Like, who wants to deal with X number of liters of a certain fuel type on the ships and calculating all that? It's just unnecessary. But I very quickly read into the realization that if you forgot to give your ships enough fuel at the last transit, and then you don't have any fuel in a ship to go to the next room, and you only realize that after you've finished a boss battle, you're kind of screwed, because if that ship survived, then, well, it might as well not have survived, because it's not going to be able to leave that room. A simple solution would have been to just automatically pull a fuel unit from the oiler for any ships that don't have fuel when they go to transit, but then it also opens up weirdness of well, what if the oiler doesn't make it across the border and you've already sent one of the other ships away? Then I figured that doing this would be more straightforward, cooler, and give you a lot more flexibility in terms of if you want to reload a ship mid-battle possibly, then you could do that using this mechanic as well. The clamps on the Mercator don't adjust yet, and that's actually the reason that the Mercator is the only Alliance ship that hasn't been redone as part of the graphics overhaul. Spoiler, because we have to make some changes to the model in order to be able to rig those clamps and have that animation actually work. Honestly, it's kind of amazing how much mileage I'm getting out of the docking mechanic, because there's more to come, don't worry. Under normal circumstances, you'll do most of your replenishment from this screen, which is the transit screen. So up at the top, there's a couple things that you can do, like view the battle report, view replenishment, and do repairs. The battle report viewer isn't copied over here yet, but that's something that I'm going to have to do once I merge in all of the stuff from main branch, so I didn't want to have to do that work twice. The repairs tab makes it so that you don't need to stick around in a previous room in order to wait for your DC teams to finish or to do restores, because these transits in actual in-game time are taking many hours, so it would make sense that your DC teams would finish up their repairs. You can also do any restores that you want here using the total number of restores you can see at the top, and those will just complete instantaneously because there's no reason to make you wait at the deploy screen for that to finish. Everything that you can do from the docked ship replenishment mechanic that I showed you a minute ago, you can do from this window as well, because remember, the reason I implemented the ship-to-ship docking was only as a fallback in case you absolutely needed to transfer something between ships. There was no reason to wait for a transit between rooms, and everything that you do at this screen, because the transfers between rooms or the travel between rooms takes multiple hours of in-game time, those transfers happen effectively instantaneously. Another surprise mechanic that I implemented is the ability to board destroyed enemy ships. This one came about when I was thinking about what to do about ammo economy, because I had originally only planned to have the ability to loot ammo as you move through the overworld at stations, but it turned out that stations were kind of too few and far between, and a lot of them didn't really make sense from a realistic perspective of why they would have a stockpile of ammunition at a civilian factory station for you to steal. And so I decided that the ability to take ammo from destroyed OSP ships would make a lot of sense and allow you to loot ammo as you go through the different rooms, because a lot of the ammo types are already cross-compatible. This can only be done for ships that have launched their lifeboats, so you can't just keep right-clicking an enemy ship to determine when it's been destroyed the second that the board option shows up. But once the lifeboats have been launched, you can board the ship, and then the docked menu will show up the way that it would when you were at a station or a replenishment ship, and then we can... Most of the ammo on this tug is not usable by us because it's 100mm, and there'll be a warning for that eventually, but we could steal the chaff, and we can definitely steal these size 2 missiles here at the bottom. And you can do this for destroyed friendly ships as well, so if you lose a ship in battle and it's got a lot of really valuable missiles on it, that doesn't have to be the end of those missiles. You can take them off the ship and transfer them somewhere else. One of the difficult things of managing a team is making it so that people's time is gainfully used when there's other things that are blocking them from actually doing their main work. When we first started working on the campaign, there was a lot of foundational stuff to do. There was the campaign editor, there was whiteboxing and story writing for the whole campaign, and during that time there wasn't really a lot of modeling and texturing work to do, so in order to keep Stefmo busy, I had him start on a graphics overhaul for the ship art. So we've gone through and updated all of the models to have face-weighted normals, which help make the edges look a lot smoother. It kind of solves the 3D modeling issue of the infinitely fine edge and makes them look a lot nicer. All of the textures for the ships are now in 4K. We've added a bunch of new decals. We've updated all of the old decals to make them look a lot better, like the docking clamps and the airlocks. We've added new markings on the hull. we've added parallax occlusion mapping. It's a very subtle effect, but it really adds a lot to making the hull look real on the textures without requiring additional geometry. So if you look at those indentations on the cargo bay door, you can see that as I rotate the camera around, the parts that would be masked if it was actual geometry kind of seem to recede into the hull. And you can see this in a bunch of places on the hull now. So the airlock has it too. There's some very subtle effects for it on the docking clamps, on the lifeboat launchers, and a bunch of other places. And to top it all off, I continued working on the improved damage shader that I mentioned in the last devlog, which now allows us to apply damage decals to the engine bells and thruster packs, which were previously totally immune to damage. And so when a ship got caught in a reactor bloom, for example, and the whole hull was cooked and the engines were all pristine, it looked very silly. And so this gets rid of that problem and makes the damage look a lot better. It works for the large explosions, it works for individual bullet impacts as well, and basically this is just projecting the damage decals from the surface that the engines sit on up through the engine bell. And to continue the journey on making it so that there are no more parts of the hull that are left unscathed by damage, we prototyped a system to allow us to project damage decals onto mounted components as well. Right now that's only prototyped for the Mark 61 cannon and the VLS-2, but we will be doing this for the rest of the weapons when we get the time. The VLS-2 looks awful because we haven't done new textures for its updated model yet, but the important part here is that the damage decals show up on it. Basically this works by knowing which portions of the damage mask UV map correspond to each area on the hull that is a socket, and then setting those UV coordinates on the mount and then allowing that mount to sample the same damage texture that the hull is using. This ship graphics overhaul is something that I've been wanting to do for a really long while, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to make it happen, and I'm really glad that we did. The Alliance ships look so much better now. We're going to move on to doing the OSP ships next, but right now we've moved on to doing the gray box models for all of the campaign maps, and the OSP ships are going to get done at a later date. There are two new HUD elements that I've added. So here we are back in Crucible, which you're familiar with from the last devlog. And now that the opening cutscene has ended, we can see that once the enemy dry flares trigger, we'll see this icon pop up on the HUD. It's got that big collapsing square around it to kind of draw your attention to it no matter where you're looking. And it shows you the direction the enemy's coming from, how long until they arrive, and how many ships there are in the strength indicator. And while we wait for that to tick down, I guess this is a good opportunity to talk about Crucible's actual gray box. So this is probably the first gray box that I think I've shown off of any of the campaign maps. If you don't know, white box is like blocky prototype, gray box is getting closer to what the final mesh will look like before we get to final art when we have an actual final model and textures. We went through a bit of a back and forth on what we were going to have the asteroids look like in the campaign, because we were trying to kind of forge a new art style for the asteroids so that we could eventually redo all of the current vanilla maps to make them look a little bit better. Originally, Stefmo had tried sculpting them in Blender, and they looked really good in Blender, but once I got them in Engine, they looked very weird. The lighting was all strange, and honestly, I thought they kind of stood in very, very stark contrast to the rest of the graphics in the game. So rather than try to figure out a proper retopology on those sculpted asteroids and try to figure out the lighting issues, I elected to just try to find a different direction, and this is kind of what we settled on. It's got much sharper, more angular lines mixed in with smoother, more organic shapes. And I'm going to work on a shader as well when we get closer to final art that will make those crisp lines pop and make them stand out from the rest of the rock surface to kind of highlight the variation between the harsh edges and the organic flat surfaces. And to show off the other element that I've added, I've used a dev command to trigger a reactor bloom on that tug, which also happened to trigger a fuel line fire, but that's not really relevant, so that I can show off that this danger icon now appears. And this is intel based, so when there is an active reactor overload on a ship and you gather enough intel to generate the new report, this danger marker will appear, letting you know that you need to clear the area around this ship. Personally, I really love the unpredictability of reactor blooms. I think it adds a lot of flavor to the skirmish games because you never really know if any wreck is safe and whether it's safe to pass by or approach it. But on the other hand, from a playability and quality of life perspective, it kind of really sucks to be driving your flagship across the map to move on to the next room and an inopportunely timed reactor bloom strips off all of the armor from your flagship that you're now going to have to be stuck with for the rest of the campaign. We also have the ability to repair at stations now, so we've docked at this OSP factory station that we've temporarily captured the docking control of. Note I said temporary. There's not going to be any station in the campaign that you're going to actually be able to capture for yourself. These are huge stations that have tens or hundreds of thousands of people living on them. They are not going to be capturable by the handful of Marines that you're carrying with you. But we can see that our DC teams have gotten back to work, and that's because this station allows us to repair our components up to 50% more than the lowest HP value that they hit, as opposed to the 10% they normally can do. And then we can also do restores here, and you'll notice that as the restores finish up, they get taken away from the list of restores that are on the station. And that's a quality of life feature so that you don't need to keep replenishing restores on your ship, consuming them, replenishing them again. You can kind of just use the restores on the station first before it starts burning from your ship supply. In order to help me with development, I also added a bunch of debugging tools. So I've got this AI visualizer that allows me to select a given unit, and I can see where it currently is, what nodes it looked at for where it could go to, who it's attacking, what ships it's comprised of, what roles those ships have, where it's going to move to. This was really useful for helping me identify a couple unusual AI behaviors that I was trying to debug. For example, why rocket shuttles seemed to drive straight into the middle of my formation, which they now no longer do. We've also got an AI strategy viewer that lets me see the entire thought process that the AI has gone through for each command cycle. It looks like a lot, and it's because it is a lot, but basically what this does is it shows me every single possible thing the AI considered doing in a given command cycle, and then I can see each round of racking all of those possible missions, assigning them to a unit, and then executing them so that I can try to figure out why certain things are getting outpried when I would rather have the AI do other things. And then also really useful for debugging the actual scripts that the AI uses and that the triggered events use is this live state viewer. So I can actually open up the AI strategy graph and see what's coming out of each node. This is not as useful for the AI, but when I want to look at like a triggered event or an objective, I can see what the outputs of the different nodes are. I can see what the input for this whole mass of logic statement is, and I can see that everything going into it is false. So obviously the objective isn't completed because of that. This has been a huge time saver in terms of figuring out why things are not triggering the way that I expect them to. And I'm really glad that I added this. And one final tool that I added is something to allow me to take advantage of the snapshot-based save system to basically analyze a player's playthrough of the campaign and see where things maybe could be balanced a little bit better. So I can select a playthrough and it will load all of the snapshots for that playthrough and analyze them and generate for me a couple of graphs about things like the offensive ammo economy, defensive ammo economy, fuel, craft, fleet power relative for each room that the player was in. So for example, in offensive ammo, I can hover over all these different ammo types and I can see, oh, well, the player seems to be running out of bombs at a certain point, and maybe there needs to be more places for them to replenish those. Balancing of the campaign isn't something that we've really gotten into yet, but having these tools ready to go when I do get to that part is going to be really helpful. I would say the biggest conundrum that I have right now is what to do about ship losses, because losses can be really devastating right now, especially if you lose a core ship like a cruiser. Placing more ships around the map for the player to pick up could make it so that a player who's doing really well and not losing ships could have a fleet that grows to an unmanageable or unplayable size or an unstoppable amount of power. For now, I've opted for two different systems to test out. The first is a system that grants you reinforcements at major checkpoints after boss battles. Say, if you lost 2 frigates that you had from the start of the game, you might get a similar one back, or if you lost your CL, you might get a 250 beam DD. Something that has some of the capability that you lost, but it's not exactly the same. You don't just get a fresh replacement. It's something worse to encourage you not to just abandon a damaged ship expecting a fresh one, but still something that'll stem the bleeding maybe. The second trial system is a ship revival mechanic where you can take a friendly ship and board a disabled friendly ship and use the restores of the ship that's doing the boarding to get the CIC and drive back online so that you can basically tow that hull somewhere to repair it more thoroughly. Overall, the goal of a system like this is to prevent people from wanting to reload in order to get a ship back, or prevent the I lost 4 rooms ago because I lost too many hulls and now I don't have the power that I need against this upcoming threat. But it's going to require more testing to decide whether either of these will actually accomplish this goal, or whether the best strategy for a lot of players is that they're just going to opt to reload from a previous save, which could be frustrating and also kind of defeats a lot of the atmosphere of the campaign that I'm going for. But we'll see. I've got plenty of time to continue trying out new mechanics and see how these play. Alright, we've reached the end, so let's talk about release schedule. I've made the decision that we're going to be releasing Act 1 first, followed by the campaign conclusion in Act 2 at a later date. Doing that is going to give us the opportunity to get lots of feedback on how the campaign plays from a broader player base, find out what people think of it, what they think of the mechanics, and a scale of testing that we can't replicate privately. It's also going to be really exciting to get the campaign editor out to the broad community so that they can start making their own campaigns sooner rather than waiting for the whole campaign to be finished, because at this point the tools are pretty much done and people can start building things if they want to. And it'll also be a great testing opportunity for the campaign editor, because even though I'm using it every day and fixing things when I find them, I'm also very intimately familiar with how the editor is meant to work, and so I kind of maybe skip over some things that might be broken if you're trying things out as a new user. Right now, we are planning to do a small tester wave. Mostly we're looking to get new players on board so we can see how the campaign plays for them, because an important part of the campaign is going to be teaching game mechanics to new players. As for the actual release date, I don't have a specific month or day for you yet, but we are currently expecting to release the first act of the official campaign at the end of Q1 2026 or slightly after that. Given that that's only a couple months away, this is probably going to be the last devlog before the first act releases, as everything from here out is pretty much just getting everything to final art, finishing up storywork, voice acting, cutscenes, animatics, that kind of stuff. Not really the kind of thing I can show off in a devlog. So I guess I'll see you in the next year after the campaign first act releases for a post-mortem where I can talk about the story decisions that we made, go through the design process for a lot of the other stuff that you'll see that I've kind of been holding out on because I didn't want to ruin any of it for you. As always, thanks for watching.